Hello and welcome back to the Ash and Stone channel. My name is Chris and today I'll show you how I went about painting my one-page rules Saurian Warriors. Sticking to the primordial swamp dweller look I went for with the geckos, I've used crocodiles as my inspiration for the Saurian Warriors. Once again, I start with an undercoat of Army Painter's Skeleton Bone, straight from the spray can. A light wash with some Army Painter's Soft Tone is used on the underside of the model to add some shading to the light underbelly. I make sure to wash the tail, the backs of the legs, inside of the arms, and the hands and feet. Vallejo Chocolate Brown is next, and this will be used as a transitional colour between the dark black and the light belly of the Saurian. The model has nicely detailed scales on the upper side of its body and limbs, and I use these scales as a guide to apply the brown, roughly slapping the paint onto the scales with a small, uneven overlap onto the lighter underside. A more uneven transition from the brown scales to the smooth underside will result in a more realistic finish. I also make sure to paint the back of the hand, but not the fingers, and the front of the legs and toes, leaving the lighter colour in the recesses between said toes. I went a bit heavy on the face on this particular model. Normally I'd leave an area around the eyes and snout skeleton bone, so I'll fix that up a little later on. Citadel Contrast Black Templar is up next, and this is applied as a heavy coat to the top sides of the model, leaving an uneven brown line at the edges. I want to hit all of the bony protrusions on the Saurian's back and work down the scaled outside of the arms and front of the legs. The scales once again provide a pretty good guide of where to paint. I also give the talons on hand and foot a quick coat, as well as the bony horns on the Saurian's chin and the area around the eyes. Once that's all dry, Vallejo Off-White comes out, and I give the underside of the creature a heavy dry brush to pick out all of the details and give us that nice white underbelly. I also give the black and brown areas a very light dry brush to A, pick out the sculpted details, and B, ease that transition between all of the colours. With that done, use the Black Templar once more to darken the talons, one coat was a little light, and to paint the stripes along the model's side. These are easy enough to do. You want a small amount of paint on your brush, and you make a series of light downward strokes from the black area and into the white. Start wide and thin the stripe down to a point. This is done along the tail, the neck, and along the model's flank, if you have access. Instead of stripes, you can also use spots. Just dot these along the side of the model to further blend the colours together. That's the complex parts done. From here, it's all pretty straightforward. Though as an aside, this is the same process I used to paint the gaiters, substituting the brown for Vallejo Black Green to give the gaiter a big old black croc look. From here, I use a little white to dot on the eyes, use a fine brush, brace your hands together and take your time. It's all about practice. Vallejo Basic Skin Tone is next, and this is used to paint the inside of the mouth and tongue. I try to get a thin line around the outside base of the teeth too. The easiest way to accomplish that is to paint the teeth and just go over the lines a little. That's followed up with Vallejo Dark Tone, and this is washed inside the mouth and around the teeth. You could use a flesh wash here, but I like the darker, more foreboding effect of the black wash. While I'm waiting for that to dry, I touch up the upper jaw with a little off-white from the palette to correct the excess brown from earlier. Just a couple of thin coats pulls the brown back and really highlights the jaws. When the black wash has dried, I can then pick out the teeth with the same off-white. They stand out really well from the black wash. For the scales of the shield, I use Vallejo German Field Grey World War II. That's a bit thin, try shaking it a bit more. That's better. I use the field grey because it's a very neutral colour that goes along with the whole aesthetic I'm going for, and the neutral colour will contrast well with the bright bronze to come, and the light and dark of the Saurian skin. After a couple of coats, I apply Army Painter Military Shader as a heavy wash on the shield scales. Keeping the shield scales plain will help trick the eye into looking at the brighter and more interesting parts of the model, like the jewellery and skin. Vallejo Beige Brown is used to paint all of the areas of wood, in this case, the club. And also as a base coat for the areas that will be bronze, such as the plaques and shield trim. Army Painter Strong Tone is used to give the wood areas a wash. You could highlight them further before or after the wash, with Vallejo Green Brown for example, but just like the shield, keeping it simple helps trick the eyes into looking at the more exciting parts. But also laziness. I use Citadel Contrast Skeleton Horde to paint the jawbone on the shield, and then grab my Vallejo German Camouflage Beige World War II to paint the areas of cord and strap. A light wash with Army Painter Dark Tone is applied to the areas that need it, like the shield straps and cord tying the jawbone into place. My much loved Vallejo Iraqi Sand is used to give the horns on the club a highlight, as well as the jawbone on the shield. With just the metallics to go, I take the model outside and give it a spray with Tamiya Flat Clear. Once we are back, Vallejo Bright Bronze is used to paint all of the bronze areas, surprisingly enough. Don't forget the tip of the tail, or you will have to do that again later. Army Painter Soft Tone is used to add some shading to the areas of bronze that need it, such as around the bracelet, plaques, and rivets. Finally, I grab some Vallejo Fire Red and hit the inside of the plaques and the dome on the shield to give it an enamelled or jewelled look. Then it's on to basing. Just like the geckos, I wanted a dead marsh, dark swamp kind of feel to the bases, so from a black undercoat, I glue on a little fine sand in a couple of patches. And that gets fixed down with a little wooded down PVA to make sure it's solid. Once that's dry, I hit the entire base with Army Painter Strong Tone. This soaks into the sand nicely, adding its own shading and highlights, and adds a subtle brown to the remaining black areas. Once that's dry, static grass goes on. And that's followed with all the black and exposed sand areas getting a couple of coats of Mod Podge gloss. Basing is by far the longest process here as we wait for each layer of glue to dry. Finally, the rim is painted black and we are done. Thank you very much for watching. I do hope you have gotten something out of this video. Did you go for the traditional blue or something else with your Saurians? We'll see you next time. Cheers.